Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Experience Kills. I'm your host Ben and with me today is Richard.
Hello.
So Richard, we're going to get back on the track, back out in the sunshine, internationally traveling around the world to get on our bikes and do some MotoGP.
You're really rubbing in the getting outdoors bit of this, which is precisely what I can't do, so thanks.
Yeah, so I'm just an asshole. But it's kind of nice that we're able to enjoy the MotoGP season here of 2020, which isn't happening right now, but we can enjoy it in a virtual form in this latest release in this long-running franchise of games. This one produced and developed by Milestone, which is an Italian developer, basically known for their motorcycle-related video games, from the MX games and the Monster Supercross games and Ride, and they also do the MotoGP games, and they've been on a bit of an upward trend of late. MotoGP 19 was really well received, and I think they're hoping to continue that with 20, and we're obviously going to get into that. But first of all, Richard, where's your kind of you've been playing as well, where's your knowledge, where's your interest in MotoGP?
It's entirely video game related, so I'll front that one up right away. I don't follow the sports, but I was a big fan of the was it the first one? I'm going back to the original Xbox. When Xbox Live came out, MotoGP was the game to play. Don't know if that was the first game in the series or not, but that's the first one I tried, and it's a long time ago.
So I remember, I think it was the second one on Xbox was for me a big deal, like you said, online. I remember the independent braking on the triggers. That sound right?
Yes.
And also the kind of like positional control you'd put your rider in on the sticks. And that would affect, balance and stuff like that as well. And I think that's the last MotoGP game I played. That was in 2003.
I think I've played 3 or 4 of them. I think there might have been a second one on the original Xbox that I played. There was definitely one on the Xbox 360 that I played that was virtually broken. I think that was MotoGP 07. And then at least one of them is on Game Pass now, or it has been in the past few weeks. Might have been MotoGP 18. But yeah, I've not really heavily got into them, except on the original Xbox when that was a huge title that everyone was playing. Remember those days when you just had to get the game that everyone else was on? Yeah,
absolutely. And
so I am one of those.
I am a big motorsport fan myself, but predominantly car-based. So Formula One is my jam, my passion when it comes to sports. So I am aware of MotoGP in a kind of tangential way. I don't watch it regularly. I've watched a few races, and I've just never got into it as much as I'd like, to be honest. And that's no fault of the sport. I think I'd probably really enjoy it if I spent a bit more time with it. I just wanted to kind of cover all that at the beginning of this video to give you an idea of where our knowledge and our interest lies in this sport. Now, like I said, me and Richard over the years have covered a lot of racing video games. Like we really enjoy our racing games here at Experience Kills. So we do have that background to kind of rely upon when looking at MotoGP. But I will say from the very beginning, this game does not onboard new people to the sport in any way, shape or form, does it? There's like no tutorials, no explanation of anything. You just kind of have to go in, pick a difficulty you think will work for you, and race. Did you fair assessment there, Richard?
I think I'd qualify that a little, because from experience with some of the older games in this series, this one does a much better job at presenting from a UI perspective. It's really easy to follow what the menus are for, where they're going, and what's important at any one time, and it's really easy to read. So even when you're talking something fairly complex like the career mode in this, which is what I've mainly been playing, there's quite a lot of options in there to recruit different people to your research and development teams. You can negotiate new contracts, choose where you're spending your time and money to improve your race results, and all of that is presented really well. It's got a really clean UI, and it could become cumbersome and confusing. It doesn't. It's a decent front end to the game.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong, absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more on that. What I'm talking about is some explanation as to how the sport works.
Absolutely.
Because but like I'm not surprised about that, because let's be honest, how many sports games do that? They're very, very few. I mean, I think there was a year with FIFA where they kind of took you through what football was, and the Madden did that one year as well, where I think EA decided that this was the year they were going to try and explain these sports to people and open up the audience. But that's not really what these games are for. And to be honest, if I was reviewing F1, which I hopefully will be doing in a few months' time for this year's edition, I would be very surprised to see that in that game, because the people buying this game are already familiar with the sport, are already fans, because you're probably not going to buy the licensed MotoGP title unless you watch MotoGP, are you? I mean, let's be honest. So I think
it's definitely geared to that. Yeah, it's geared towards people who know what the sport is. And part of me was thinking, I suppose just because of my own experience, is that a missed opportunity because it was so big back in the day? Whether there's room for clearer onboarding for people who don't know what they're talking about when they come into this sort of game and this sort of complex sport arena. That said, I did find my way into it, and it does give you opt-outs for things that you think, well, maybe that's a bit too full on for me. So when you're going in through the career mode, you've got the option of time trials, practice runs, different qualifying rounds, or you can just race, which is obviously what I did. So you don't have to go the full-on simulation route in this. It does dial it down, and you've got quite a lot of options to simplify it for yourself. It just doesn't make those entirely obvious. And maybe I think we've talked about this before the show, whether or not it could do a better job of tailoring it to intermediate skill sets.
Yes.
So I'm playing it on easy. It really does feel like my hand is being held too hard. I'm a bit scared to go up to normal because my experience of that in the previous installments, I think MotoGP 18, was not a fun experience. So
yeah,
I'm not sure where I am with that at the minute.
So
you've played a bit more than me though.
Yeah, I want to dig into some of that a little bit, because I think it's interesting the way you mentioned that. Easy is definitely too easy for someone familiar with racing games, because the AI is of no consequence, and it's kind of ridiculous how easy it is to get past them and stay in front of them. But then medium is kind of difficult as well, because it doesn't quite fit the build for someone who isn't familiar with the sport that well. So I feel like they've maybe not sort of tailored it quite right. They're getting there. There are still lots of things with the assists you can turn on and off, physics modeling, damage modeling, all of that stuff can be tweaked so that, you know, you can try and find that sweet spot. But it took me a good few hours to get there. One of the things, for example, I'm playing the career mode like you, but instead of going straight into MotoGP, I started in Moto 3 because I like the idea of moving up through the feeder series, which is something I'm familiar with from the F1 games as well. So I went in for that, and the bikes perform really badly in comparison to the full MotoGP bikes, so they're very, very sort of underpowered. And something I noticed in the game in general, technically audio is kind of crap. There's a lot of audio distortion in places in this game, and bike engines, and all of it sounds a bit flat and a bit crap. But in MotoGP, in Moto 3, they sound particularly bad because they just sound like this droning like 50cc engine that's just going through your brain, and it's just awful to listen to. I had to turn the volume down on the audio just so I didn't have to put up with that through a whole race. But then sort of like just learning how bikes handle differently to cars, how you have to sort of coast into corners and cadence brake around them and then try and power out of them and put the pedal down at different places to what I would do if I was playing a Formula 1 game. I think there is a lot of nuance to this, and I respect how sim heavy it will be if you turn everything up to full, you know, simulation level, so the hardest difficulties with all the physics modeling and stuff like that. And I really like the fact that it can go there for the fans. I like the fact that the race weekends are as realistic as they would be in Formula 1 game as well, so that everything is there. So you've got the multiple practices, which Richard alluded to. Something different in MotoGP to Formula 1 is that in the free practice sessions, the fastest times in free practice get to skip qualifying 1 and go straight to qualifying 2. So it actually matters the times you set in free practice for your qualifying session. Something I didn't realise until I played the game for a couple of hours and kind of was like, well, why am I always never getting to qualifying 2 and stuff? So all of that combined with, you know, the difficulty settings leads to a fully featured game here. The career mode is really rich. I loved all the development aspects. I really enjoyed how much you could put into that and how much time you could spend managing your team and developing it, how you could take bids and try to move up through the series and switch teams and stuff. All of that's really, really well done. I really like that. Then in addition to that, there are some other modes, and Richard, you said you maybe hadn't tried them, but they're actually quite cool, like the historic modes. So you hadn't?
I've just done the career mode at the moment, so I've seen that there's a bunch of other things in there. So you've got quick play, obviously. There's multiplayer stuff which we've not had the opportunity to do yet because this is pre-release, and as you say, the historic mode. But I don't have any context for that. I don't know what the history of MotoGP is, so
me neither.
That's good or not. No idea.
No, what was cool about it, though, a lot of the driver names and historic settings didn't mean much to me. So it's kind of interesting the way it's presented. So you get these easy, intermediate, and hard challenges, and based on those and how well you do in them, you get kind of like credits, which you can then unlock more historic drivers and teams with. A fun little additional mode. I think that is a cool idea. I'd love to see something as fledged out as that in other racing game series like F1. That would be a really fun way of like incentivizing you to try these challenges, because you have that kind of currency thing. It does sit a bit against the sim heavy other aspects of this game as a little bit of an arcadey sort of additional thought, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's kind of cool that it's in there if you're looking for a more pick up and play, less intensive racing experience. I think that's a cool idea. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
That's an unusual tie-up for me, though. I mean, going into this as an amateur, then you would, I don't know, my assumption was that if it's going to be based on the history of MotoGP, it's for true fans and isn't going to be anything more in-depth than the main game, Just really hammer it home that this is for the people who know what this sport is and just want to know every single detail of it. So to hear that it's more of an arcadey thing, then I suppose that's I wouldn't have put that there, is what I'm saying. It definitely is a good fit for the game, because going back to when we played MotoGP, there was that feeling that you could just drop in. It was almost like a hang-on experience, not mega simplistic, but certainly lots to know in the controls and lots to master, but you could just jump in and have fun with it. So there is room for that in the MotoGP series, for more of a quick entry fun game rather than the sim heavy stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think it sits there nicely. I think perhaps what you're saying is it could have been presented in a different way, so that you realised it was less hardcore instead of more hardcore, as it were.
Yes.
Yeah. I noticed some issues with this game, and I did some reading into the previous iterations as well, and that AI is sometimes an issue in these series by Milestone. And I've also noticed that problem. I have this incredible footage, which hopefully you're seeing right now, of the formation lap in a Moto 3 series race prior to the race. So this is fully AI controlled, including my bike, as they go around. And basically, the bikes are... The drivers are suicidal. I don't know what's going on. They're flying all over the track. They're crashing in every direction. Everyone's taking out everyone else, including my bike gets taken out. Everybody's just crashing everywhere, driving into barriers. It's very, very strange. And something I also noticed is when I was leading a race, you get these little pop-ups on the screen telling you so-and-so's crashed out, or there's been an accident at this turn or whatnot, like that. And it just seemed to happen all the time. And I again, Richard, admit, not super familiar with the race, and I know there are crashes in MotoGP. It does happen, but surely not to the extent that was being sort of simulated while playing this game. Did you notice this as well?
Yeah, I did actually. That you constantly get messages flashing up to say that someone else has crashed, although you can't see it because I suppose where I was in the middle of two different packs. But yeah, constant messages saying someone's crashed, then they've crashed again, and you just think, well, I don't know what's happening up front, but maybe I don't want to catch that.
Yeah, they're just taking each other out.
Yeah. So yeah, that is unusual. What did strike me though when I was in the middle of those sort of experiences and it got a bit jostly, I really liked the rewind function in this game.
Oh god, yeah. Couldn't live without it. Couldn't live without it in this game, mate. Oh my god. So
not
integral.
Just that it's there, but I really liked how it was implemented, because I think we first saw this sort of thing in the Forza series, and it hasn't really improved how it does that, even though we've seen many iterations of that game now. it still pretty much does what it does. But it really struck me in this how tidy that rewind mechanism is. So it's sort of a constant rewind until you stop it, rather than the stop-start thing in Forza. So you can kind of pick your moment when you think, right, that's where I want to start the action again, rather than it be a predetermined sequence of seconds in Forza.
It gives you a very generous amount, doesn't it, to rewind? You can really go back a long way if you want.
A generous amount, and you can pinpoint exactly where you want to resume from. And then when you do resume, I really like the way that it sort of eases into starting back up again. So it starts playing back slowly and then gradually picks back up to speed, so you're not instantly back in at 90, 100 miles an hour. You can get the feel of where you are on that particular corner or that overtake, and get your bearings with it, rather than it just be a sudden, oh right, I'm in it again. So yeah, I thought that was a really tidy way of doing it. On the downside, I did notice that there were some technical problems with it as well. So when you do crash, or when it cuts to a crash sequence, I don't know if you had this, but I had probably 3 or 4 occasions where the game just hangs for a couple of seconds before it remembers it's supposed to be loading in some assets for a crash or sound effects or something. It just doesn't know what it's doing for a minute.
Yeah, so
did you have that?
So first of all, one of the things that I just want to mention about the rewind thing I really enjoyed is that if you crash and it's, say, the camera view isn't the best for the crash, rewinding and watching your player, your character get back on the bike going backwards is pretty entertaining. Can I just say that? I enjoy doing that quite a bit. In addition, so yeah, let me come back around to your performance thing. And I think when this game is at its best, when you're driving one of these bikes at what feels like 1,000,000 miles an hour, basically surrounded on all sides by other bikes, you get this most incredible sense of speed and danger, like you're right on the edge, and that feels incredible, like really, really well done. Which just makes it such a shame when you get these hitches, when you get these moments of, I don't know what it is, if it's like frames having issues or lagging, but it just freezes for a couple of seconds, or not even that long. It feels longer than it is, I'm sure, but it is enough to pull you completely out of the experience and to really ruin that sense of speed. I noticed it sometimes happened when, if there's a crash somewhere down in the field and it wants to give you an update on what's happened, it just freezes for a split second, and that if you're in the middle of a corner, or if you're passing someone at 200 miles an hour, that can really mess you up. That can take you out of the flow and cause you to crash or ruin your line or something, and you're gonna have to rewind and whatever and do it again. And that is really unfortunate. Like, that is such a shame, because I think the game, for the most part, the bikes look great. The physics modelling is really impressive.
It surprised me, because going into it, you've got the whole character creation stuff, and I went in thinking, these bikes, these characters, they actually look pretty well produced. It's high definition models, a lot of detail in there. I thought, well, okay, they've really gone to town on this one. Maybe they've stepped it up from the last version I played.
Just connected to that, there's a whole creation suite. I didn't really get into that, it's not my bag, but you can create liveries for the bikes, and like helmet designs and suit designs, to do like really in-depth stuff, which you can then upload and share with the community. Sadly, none of that's available now because we're doing this pre-release, but that like really gone into that visual presentation, haven't they? Like really pushed it. So it's a shame, isn't it, when the game's fundamentals.
When it works, it's frustrating. So when it works, it looks decent. I mean, in game, it's not quite up to the levels that you would imagine from the character create stuff. So backgrounds are pared back, and the usual pixelated crowds are there still. There's nothing to shout about in terms of the environment so much, but the bikes and stuff, they look pretty good.
That's all I really care about in a game like this, I'll be honest with you. I want the cars or the bikes to look good, the tracks to be accurate representations of what they are in real life, and the physics and the sense of speed to be brilliant. And it ticks all of those boxes. So when you do get those hitches and those problems, now, once again, playing this pre-release, there could be a day one patch, I really don't know. So things like that could get sorted out. Absolutely. but like we're both playing on Xbox One X's, you know, with the best sort of console hardware available. So when you get that performance problems, it is kind of glaring, and it does stand out. And I mentioned earlier on as well, audio is not a strong suit of this game, and that is a shame because that does hurt immersion, I think, a little bit. And I think it's very flat and very basic, the audio presentation for the racing in this game. But that's not the end of the world. That's not, you know, it's not terrible. It just doesn't stand out as being anything particularly to write home about, you know, for the most part. But yeah, the hitching issue is unfortunate. Now, fingers crossed they sort that out. Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to add here at the end, Richard? Any other little points you want to drop in before we wrap this one up?
What to add? I suppose all I'd say is that it's too early to say how much fun this would be online, because we've not had the chance to play it, and I feel that would be a big aspect of this game.
Yeah.
Especially going back to how we enjoyed it like 15 years ago or whenever it was. Online play is a big part of it, so whether that flies or whether it doesn't, it's difficult for us to say, so bear that in mind if you're taking our advice on whether to get this game or not. But as a tool set for whether that could be good, I suppose it has the potential. Again, you have more experience of this game than me. I've only played it briefly compared to the time that you've put in, but I've not really had chance yet to see how well it lives up to those original control aspects that the original Xbox version brought us. So the stuff like independent braking was a big deal for me when I tried to master it back in the day. The independent body control where you could lean forward and back or lean into corners made a massive difference, and it was complex to play but so rewarding. I've not been able to explore how far this game goes into that yet.
I think it's important to say that we've talked about several iterations of MotoGP throughout this review, and they've all been by different developers.
Yeah.
So the one you're referring to right now, I couldn't tell you the name of the developer, not a chance, but I can tell you it wasn't Milestone. So I think
it was Climax originally.
I don't even know who that is really. Like, do they exist still? Who knows? But
I don't know.
But the case is that they probably came at this in a very different way to the way Milestone is coming at this, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I just think it's a different experience. Like you, though, that was my memory of MotoGP games, so I was quite surprised when that feature or thing wasn't in the game, but it didn't necessarily mean it wasn't good. It just means it handles things very differently.
That's kind of where I was going with it, because, you know, I want to be honest with people listening. I've only played it on easy, so it might just be that I hadn't seen it and it's there. But if you've played a lot more of it than I have, if you haven't seen it either, then that would point to
there is independent braking, but it seems to have a lot less of an impact on the gameplay.
Right.
There's barely any body control stuff from what I can tell. But yeah, I mean, once again, I'm not an expert. I've never ridden a motorbike. I've barely watched MotoGP. I just want to wrap this up now. I think this is a good representation of the sport from what I know of the sport. I think if you're a fan of MotoGP, you're probably going to find loads to enjoy in this game. If you are not a fan of MotoGP, however, you will feel much like me and Richard, a little bit lost, a little bit confused, but at the end of the day, a well-made racing game with a few unfortunate technical problems is what you are presented here with this year from Milestone. From what I've read, it's another step in the right direction to making this a great MotoGP game, and I think they're nearly there. I just think they need to iron out a few kinks. You can tell that they are a smaller Italian developer with a passion for like everything motorcycle related. And, you know, they have done a good job here this year. And for the most part, I really enjoyed my time. I really enjoyed the challenge of getting to grips with an entirely different motor racing series. You know, with entirely different forms of handling. The idea of how you approach corners, how you power out the corners. It feels completely different to something you would do on four wheels. So I think that is fun in itself if you're not that familiar with this series of racing games. So there's a lot here to like. Is that fair, Rich?
I think that's fair. Yeah, let's wrap it up.
Okay, that has been another episode of Experience Kills. I hope you enjoyed listening to us talk about MotoGP 20 on all the major platforms, coming out right now, basically, by Milestone. And you can check that out on all your digital storefronts, because let's be honest, right now, if you're listening to this in any time in April or May, you won't be going to a physical store to purchase this game. If you have enjoyed this content, please follow us on Twitter at Experience Kills. You can also find me at DIYE, and you can find Richard at Colonel Red. While you're at it, why not head over to the YouTube channel? Well, as you're there already, actually, aren't you? Give us a like and a subscribe, and you can also check out the audio versions of all of these videos on our podcast feeds on iTunes, Spotify, or anywhere a good podcast can be found. So until next time, I'm going to say ta-da. Richard?
Ta-da!